This is Amy.
This is Kelly, and you're listening to Diary of a Death Investigator, episode 45. We're still counting it down to 50. Amy is calling this Who's the Bad Guy? You know it's going to be good when she goes, oh, this is a good one.
It's like I'm going through my stack, and I'm like, this one's okay. This is okay. And I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about this.
Well, we've spent the last 30 minutes trying to find a case that she worked on, and maybe we'll continue to pursue this.
Yeah, I'll have to search for it. It wasn't necessarily my case, but it was one that I got to work on with a pathologist during my schooling. Gosh, he was one of my favorite pathologists because he let me do things like that with him. And so that's why I was like constantly learning. So
we've been Googling, and it's a little disturbing, the things that you read while you're Googling, like the specific thing that we were looking for, which is, is bad. But before the bad, we had good. So we got a really, really nice email today, and we got permission to talk about it. So it's from Charisma where is she from? I think it's Wisconsin. Yeah, Wisconsin. And thank you for listening.
Yes.
And thank you for the very nice email. But we wanted to talk about a little bit about her email because she was asking for Amy's advice because she wants to be a death investigator, and she's asking for let's see, she has an interview coming up, and she's asking about like what type of questions she should be prepared for, or what she should, I guess, mostly just be prepared for, or advice. So we're going to send you a detailed email. You'll have already received it by the time this podcast comes out. But a little bit of advice for an interview. Amy, do you have anything for?
Yeah. So actually, I'll give you some things that I think will come up. And then actually, I think I'll have Kelly also give you some advice because Kelly is actually really great at giving interview advice as well. And I ask her for help on wording stuff as well because I'm not always so great in that department, but I'm like the knowledge in the field, and Kelly's very good at like the people stuff. So that's why we do so well in doing this together. So first thing, I think a lot of times, like I know because I am actively looking for jobs as well. And I know the number one thing is they are looking for experience and knowledge in your field. And I know, for example, in one of the supplemental questions, they asked, like, what would you do in a certain case, specifically like baby deaths? And they wanted to give an example of how you would investigate this death. And so I gave literally every single example of any type of baby death that I could. And I wrote it all out, and it was probably a 5-page in-depth answer of how I would investigate a baby death. And that's because I have worked so many different kinds. And I think that even if you don't have experience in that particular type, you could always say that I'm willing and open to research on how to do that. And you can always say that you can find those things out in the World Wide Web in forensic pathology journals. And there is a lot of information for you in that aspect that aren't like locked behind financial type of things, because those are basically like the most difficult types of cases to work. And when I was talking to Kelly about this, she stated that she thought that they had asked this question because they wanted to know basically how I would react to that in a emotional means.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting they asked you baby specific because to me, that's probably one of the most emotional cases. And you always said that have said on here as well that baby cases were the hardest cases. And I remember asking you one time, like how you could do any of this. And you're like, well, those people are no longer there, right? Like it's just a shell of a person. It's not taking value away from them, but it's just, that's how you viewed it, right? Where I think with babies, it just makes everybody emotional because you're just like, oh, they're so young and things. So I suspect that was probably one of those, like, how you would handle it. And the fact that you've already handled them says something as well.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know, there's like a part of me too. It's like when I get into that mode, I kind of switch on like a different part of me where I'm like, okay, this is like investigator mode. This is what I need to do first because I never want to miss something. And so I kind of go through like this mental checklist. It's like, that's just what I do to kind of turn off the emotional part of my brain. So there's like a couple things that they'll look for in that. They want to know like how you would handle a scene. So you'll get questions that they'll say, they want like situational type of things that they will ask you, like, how would you process this scene in particular? How would you handle a body at the scene? And especially when you're doing, for example, like your ABMDI certification to get certified to become a death investigator, which that will come, I believe it's 6 months to a year within your first year as a death investigator, you have to get certified in that. But even on that test, they ask these same type of questions and they'll say, how would you handle a family in this type of situation? So if you have like a family member that is in like a high emotional state, they'll ask you, what would you do in that situation? Which I've had those things happen to me as well, where officers have left me on scenes by myself, where you have to de-escalate a situation. That's a big one because sometimes in certain counties, they want you to report to next of kin. Also dealing with funeral homes. So sometimes you might have to be the one that is finding the funeral home after the decedent's autopsy is completed, as well as sometimes, how would you maybe identify that person if they are an unidentified remains. So they want to know how you would handle all of these things. And so that is all these things that they're going to want to know is just to basically test your knowledge. And so everything that I've realized through the process that I'm currently going through myself right now is they rate you on a scale and they basically just compare you to everyone else. And basically it's that with, I think they want to see how well you would mix in with the group of other investigators as well. So what I've known from the past of what I've seen from where I've worked is a lot of times you'll have like your HR, then you'll have your supervisor in there, and then they might have one or two other investigators on an interview as well. And so other investigators' opinions are really important too, because you'll be working with them for long hours. And they might ask you, like, how do you handle working nights and weekends and holidays and long shifts? And are you willing to work those as well? So I think,
which the answer is yes.
Always, yeah, because you're going to be the one that's going to be working all of those holidays at first, since you're going to be the new one, unfortunately.
Well, and that's true, because Amy missed a lot of holidays with us because she was working, and the dead don't rest on holidays. So, and you actually said, I think a lot of the holidays were really busy.
Yeah, always.
So, yeah.
Lots of homicides.
And I think this is just in general. I mean, not that all of you listening are interviewing for jobs, but you never know, especially in this climate that we're in. But I just tell Amy, like, one, you have to be really confident in everything, in the whole entire process, right? Like, it's okay to ask questions. It's okay, like, if they're not getting back to you, or maybe you have a question on what something means, just ask them. I would rather somebody ask me what something means and be assertive than to question it and wonder, like, oh, am I doing this wrong? Or just not do anything, right? Like, and also not to be afraid to ask those questions. But most people know as soon as they see you, like within the first, I would say even minute of a conversation, most likely they've already looked at your resume. You're getting the interview and you're confident in what you're saying. They know whether they like you or not. They just know. Just come prepared. I always come prepared. Always have questions. Even if it's like you don't really have a question, come with questions, ask them questions, because you're interviewing them as well. Because the reality is these people are going to be people that you're spending a lot of time with. I have my work family and I spend a lot of time with them. So, you end up spending more time with them than you do sometimes your own family. So you want to make sure that you fit in or, that you're going to like them.
I will say, especially in this type of field too, because no one's going to understand what you're going through emotionally like they will. So,
and always at the end, make sure to send a thank you follow up, because even now, I've been in my industry for 17 years. I'm still sending follow up thank yous. So it's just one of those things. It's courtesy, it's tradition. And I think those are the people that typically will get calls back, right? Because you care, because you really do care. If you really want the job, and I know Charisma really wants this job. So we're rooting for you. Hopefully you get it. But one of the other questions that she asked, and it's something that people have been asking us as well, is what other degrees or certificates can people get to make themselves stand out or, further their career? And then what type of jobs could they go into that maybe isn't death investigation, but along like the lines of, forensics?
So the first one is degrees and certificates. So especially in this specific field, I ended up going back to school because I couldn't find a job. And so I was like, okay, well, it just so happened that the director of the institute that I was going to said, literally as I was getting ready to go back to school, he said, hey, there's also an opening for a morgue position. So if you want to come back to school, this would work perfectly with that position where you could work weekends and holidays, and it's part-time. So you could get experience just working in the morgue where you would be checking bodies in and you would search them and you could help prepare with autopsies and you could get to watch autopsies and you would learn from the doctors. You would help with their imaging processing. And so I was like, yeah, absolutely. And that's like getting your foot in the door. That's really what a lot of that is. And then I was working on my master's where I was focusing in medical legal death investigations, which at the time I was like, what the heck even is that? So I honestly didn't even know that was like a thing. And I mean, it really
mean legal death? What's legal death?
Yeah, I was like, oh, I didn't realize other than like the pathologist that they had someone that was like going out to scenes for like a medical examiner because, coroners, they're, they have their deputy coroners and they have their coroners. Like, isn't that the same thing? So I learned so much real fast, and it just so happened to work out for me while I was getting my master's that 6 months into it, that they had an investigative position open up, and my institution worked with me to let me do some like independent studies where I could earn some credits through my job. And then, I still had to show up to school and take night stuff. And there were one or two teachers, which it was weird because they were technically electives through criminal justice, that didn't like that I had to leave in the middle of class to actually go to a scene. And I was like, I don't care. This is like the job that I'm actually working in my field of study. It was like anti-terrorism or something. I was like, you just think your like class is more important than everyone else's. But yeah, it just so happened that I could work on my degree while I was working that job, which I will say was not easy at all, especially working 24-hour and 32-hour shifts. I think I called mom a lot and was like, I'm going to quit. I'm tired. I hate this. And writing a thesis at the same time, which is a lot. But technically that counts as a publication, which is really important in our field. So science is really important to have any publications. So certificates are kind of hard to do unless you are actually working in that field at the time, because kind of like their requirements are you be in that job with so many working hours before you can actually like apply for that certification. Unless you are currently in school and they have like a type of program that you can work towards a certificate through the school program and you have maybe a professor that can help assist you in getting that certification. I mean, and that's the same thing with like your ABMDI certification. You actually have to actively be working for an agency to be certified, because my certification lapsed after 5 years. And I was like, oh, I'll just get recertified before I apply. And you can't even get recertified unless you're working for an agency. So I was like, that's kind of poopy. So yeah, certifications, and they're really expensive. So I will say, make sure it's something you actually want to be doing, because it's like $300 or $400 a pop to get, or even just take the test for the certification. So that's why they want you to have some working experience in the field, to make sure that you aren't just taking all these random tests and just to fail them, basically like throwing money away. So as far as your classes, I will say with this field, try to take things that are hands-on and in person, because taking a lot of stuff online in this, unless it's something like that's anatomy, but even then doing anatomy classes where you can actually work on, I was going to say dissection, but it's doing an autopsy. Yeah, with cadavers, or even funeral services, because that does translate well in this field also. That's something that you could do also. But doing things that are hands-on really help, because that's what my dual degree was, with criminal justice and forensic science. But a lot of my forensic science stuff was hands-on that really translated well. So like my crime scene processing, my crime scene reconstruction, the photography, the blood spatter, all of those things that I did were so helpful, because it actually made me a better investigator on scene. Because like in my mind, as I'm looking at the body on scene, like you can eyeball stuff better and be like, this doesn't look right and adjacent to where the body is. So I also, in the process of when I was applying, I've had certain agencies ask me, what education do you have that's even in relation to this job? And they want you to give specific classes and like the class number and the class name and where you took it at. So there again, if they're rating you on a scale and you have all these classes that you've taken, that's just going to make you look better as well.
So as far as jobs, like, because I selfishly want Amy to move out to California, so I am on the job hunt for her. You know, you can do medical examiner. You can be, you were talking about a transport driver.
Mm-hmm.
You can, at one point, you even talked about like FBI and stuff, but that is a very long process. So if you're interested in that, you got to start it now.
I will say from experience from my friend that we mentioned on here, FBI doesn't pay a whole lot of money, and it is a requirement that you basically have to be, when you commit to them, you have to commit so many years to them, and you have to be wherever they place you in a location for that many years. So
flexible. You have to be flexible.
Exactly. And so basically like, here, give up your life for this long in a job that you may not actually want to do. And it's competitive because everyone wants to work for the FBI.
Well, there are jobs out here right now for the FBI, just FYI. Amy didn't think that was very funny. I thought it was. Anyway, there's also, you have talked about people actually asking you to become a specialist in things like blood splatter. And so you've talked about like you having to be like, you can be certified in that. And so those are the people that are specialized and go in court, and you hear them like, oh, well, this is why this happened. And this is why we believe these, you know, you see them in the court, like on court TV or whatever.
So a lot of times those people don't become that until after they've literally been working like in the field as like a CSI or like a detective after like 20 plus years.
Well, I know that you've had somebody ask you about it before. Also, Amy hasn't mentioned this, I don't think, but she did teach a forensics course to high school students at a college during the summer.
Yeah.
So she like taught fingerprinting and you did blood splatter there.
Footwear impressions. We did like a drug testing analysis. Like that was really fun. So yeah, wherever you can get some experience, even like an organ share network where you work with the medical examiner or your coroner's office, where you have to contact them and you just start learning names. We had separate transport drivers that came out with us. So they were actually on scene with us and they were working with us. So they actually got to watch what we did and they helped with us. So they were like learning what we were doing. Like I said, when I started working in a morgue, and it wasn't necessarily like always the funnest thing to do because yeah, you were working weekends and holidays, but you got to work a lot. And like I said, I learned a lot from the doctors. And actually during that time, I even got to do some histology on days that were slower. So I'd sit with the autopsy techs or Deaners, and they would teach me how to do histology, which was, they would have the organs or the tissue that was put into wax and formalin, and they would break it down and put it into smaller pieces into wax. And then you put them on slides for the doctors so that they could analyze them at microscopy view. And so, yeah, I got to do that as well, which was really cool. I mean, any type of like stuff like that, you can, because that can even lead to like a lab job, a toxicology job in a medical examiner lab. So, or maybe you could even work as a part-time assistant in the medical examiner lab, toxicology lab. So there's a lot of little part-time jobs like that you could do. It's just getting your foot in the door at the right place and then getting your experience there.
So we hope we helped a little bit for anybody who has these questions. Like I said, we've received these questions a couple of times now, and we will email you back, Charisma. So like I said, by the time this podcast comes out, you'll have received an answer from us. But if anybody else has questions, you can email us at kelly@diaryofadeathinvestigator.com. Our email address is in the podcast link or wherever you listen. It's like in the whole, what is that? The information below or the description of the episode. Or you can message us on our Instagram page, Diary of a Death Investigator.
I was going to say, it's right above the reviews tab.
Oh, yeah. Please like, review.
Nice reviews, please. And if you don't, just say nothing at all.
No, we appreciate the feedback. We think it's good and helpful. Like I said, I mean, this is a long process. I can admit,
I know when I'm on and I know when I'm not. Okay, so.
But now that we've given a detailed description of what you can do as a death investigator or how to become a death investigator, why don't you tell us a story of when you were a death investigator?
Yeah. Oh, this one. Oh my gosh. This is when I was an in-house investigator. And let me tell you something. I always hated when I got calls from the county jail. And particularly
hold on. What's an in-house investigator?
It's when I was working at like the office and I would work in the morgue and
got it.
Like from, yeah. Because remember in the end, I was working in district. Yeah. So the county jail where we live in like the metro, it's disgusting. And it's like really run down. Like, I'm pretty sure it's like nationally known to be like disgusting. So
I guess I envision all jails as disgusting.
No, because as sad as this is, like I've had to go to like many other jails, and surprisingly, like a lot of these other jails are actually decently clean. And I get it. It's, I mean, a lot of it's due to like the population, right? But like a lot of it's because of like how the prisoners treat it. So yeah, it's just like, it makes your like skin crawl when you think about like having to go. It's just like you want to just take a bottle of Lysol and just like spray yourself before you go in and like saran wrap yourself. And then like as you're walking, you want to spray down like everything that I saw as you walk by. It's just, it's bad. And when you go in, they don't lock up all the prisoners, like when you go in. So you just feel like you have to be on constant guard.
Vulnerable?
Yes.
Yeah, you're
and
vulnerable.
I'm like watching my back, I'm watching on my shoulders, and the deputies that are on duty, they're not watching out for you, they're watching out for them. And I'm like, I have to watch out for number one. And I'm like, they're all watching you, and they're like pushing their like mops around, and they're, following you wherever you're going. And this jail's huge. It's like 13 floors or something like that. So that I already don't like. And then, it just has a certain funky smell to it. So, you want to ask them, like, that this is going on here, which I'm sure they don't want to, well, everyone knows when they see the medical examiner arrives what happens. And then everything goes through the pipes. They talk to each other and they send stuff through the toilets to each other. So everyone knows what's going on, but I'm sure they don't want riots going on. So I'm like, why do you lead me through this area where I'm like, I don't want to get shanked. So then they take you to these elevators that they probably haven't been serviced since the place was built. So they don't feel very safe. It's like they either jam or they're like shifty. And so it's like, I don't know what's worse, either being shanked or dying by a sudden elevator drop. So
I can answer that.
Like,
sudden elevator drop.
I don't know, dude. Like, I'm at the point where I'm like, do I want to risk this for the biscuits? No, it's not worth it. And you're like on the elevator with all these deputies, and they're just like, oh, this is normal. I'm like, no, elevators shouldn't be doing this. It's not normal.
No, they work normally.
And I mean, it's the jail. It's like, don't you have like county tax money to fix this stuff? And there's like bed bugs there. And I'm like, why is this carpet like wet and like sodded? Like, it's disgusting because like the prisoners are like peeing in there, and you're just like, oh my gosh, like, why do I want to do like what? Like, this is when you're like, why do I do this? And so they get off this floor, and at least at this point, they have all the prisoners in this, because at each block, you walk in, and it kind of like, so you go down like the cell, like, or the floor aisles, and then they break off into these like honeycomb shaped like rooms. And so like they have like one shower in there, and that's like an open type of shower. And then like there's like multiple like cell rooms with like big doors, and then they have little tiny windows in them. And sometimes they take paper and they'll cover up the windows, and sometimes they don't. So a lot of times they're yelling and screaming at you the entire time while you're doing stuff. And that's also distracting because you're just like, you are trying to ignore them and not listen to what they're saying. But of course they're saying like the world's most disgusting things to you. And they have these like tables that are in the middle of this like honeycomb shaped room. And I'm like, I need a place to set down my stuff. And I'm like, is there even a clean place in here to set my stuff? And so I have like Clorox wipes, and I get one out, and I like wipe like the top of the table down the titanium table, because everything in there is titanium. So they can basically come in there and like power spray everything if they need to. And then, like I said, the bed bugs are everywhere. So you're just like, so I set my stuff there, and then I like Clorox the little tiny like round seat, and I sit there. I'm like talking to the deputies who do not Clorox their little area, and they're like setting their bare arms on it. I'm like, yuck. So I'm like asking, about this guy and what happened and whatever. Apparently this guy has been a lot of problems for them. And he's a big guy, like 6'4", well over 200 pounds, like not like a heavy set guy, just big built, like a football player. And he's known to abuse drugs. So when he was arrested for assault and battery and for his drug abuse. And I believe like a lot of his stuff was like domestic, but of course has multiple history of prior arrests. And as soon as he gets into jail with other prisoners, he like beats the crap out of them. So they have to put him in a cell by himself. So he's only been in jail for like a couple of days at this point, and it takes like multiple people to put him into a cell. Well, he is trying to fight them off basically, and they get him into this cell. And I know that they had tried to give him like medications and everything. He wasn't having it. He's like coming off of his drugs. So of course he's really not doing well, and he's really unhappy about this. So they have to go into his cell at one point and basically bring him down to the ground. And when deputies are trained to de-escalate a prisoner, they're taught to like bring their arms behind their back or whatever, like put their like knee on their back. So this is like the story I'm given. There's like 3 of them that are doing this, and they're like bringing him to like the cell ground. And they said they got him to calm down, and they brought him like food and medication. Well, they said after that, they noticed that he remained on the ground, and they brought him in his lunch or whatever. A couple hours later, he was still on the ground, and they said he was like mumbling to them. And they're like, okay, well, they didn't really care because he wasn't a problem for them, right? So why would they care if he wasn't really coherent? Well, they bring like dinner in, and still not really coherent. So they just like leave it there like on his like bunk and like nothing. So several more hours go by, and like they go in to check on him, and yeah, he's stiff. He's dead. So
that doesn't make a lot of sense.
No, it doesn't, right? I'm like, well, something clearly happened.
Okay, wait. I have a question. Were any of these guys who were hooting and hollering at you spilling the tea? Were they telling you what was happening what happened to him?
No, because they wouldn't be able to see technically, because their windows are like, I don't know, 4x6 or 6x6, you know, they're tiny. And a lot of times they're just screaming because, you know, they just want like a reaction out of you because they think it's funny. So that's it. Yeah. So it's like, well, that sounds weird. Like it sounds like something might have happened during this altercation that you guys had. And I was like, so did anyone report that anything unusual happened at this time? And did anyone, you know, because this was kind of, you know, around the time when cops and stuff were getting in trouble from kneeling on necks and all that kind of stuff. And of course they're going to tell you no. And so I was like, okay, well, I guess, you know, we'll look at him. And so I go into the cell, and in the cells, I mean, of course, you know, it's pretty standard. You have like the little titanium, you have the toilet, and then they have like, it's not like a desk, but it's built like in wall, and that's titanium as well. And then they have like the 2 bunks that are built in wall, but they didn't give him mattress. He didn't have any mattresses on the beds on the wall. And I noticed that he had been using his own poop to write all over the walls and on his little titanium table over there. So that was real lovely.
What did he write? Anything important?
You couldn't. It was real thick. So I was like,
it would stink so bad.
Kelly, I have smelled things that people should not smell. So that's, smells do not bother me, especially when you like even teach like high school kids. They're like, ugh, why does it stink so bad in here? I'm like, I don't know why you guys are complaining because this is my classroom and I have to smell it all day long. So you guys need to shut your mouths. So I was like, and this isn't even that bad.
No.
So
nothing like poop on the walls.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, who knows what's still inside him? So, okay.
Oh, good point.
So I'm like, this is weird. And the guy is laying on his left side. And like I said, he's a big guy. It just looks kind of like weird that he just doesn't look like he fits in this cell to me because he's just such a big person. And then I see like his it's like a takeout box of food in his cell. So like I checked like his boxes to see if he'd even tried eating anything, and like nothing was even touched in his food. So I thought that was odd. I was like, dang, he had like a day and a half of food that he didn't even eat. So this guy must have been like hurting really bad, especially if, he's coming off or like coming down from all of his drugs, and like who even knows. And I didn't see anything in there as far as any like liquids that he would have had to drink or anything in there that looked like he could have hurt himself. But there again, I don't know what they could have done before I got there. So that's always a factor as well. So you always have to ask for camera footage of what goes on at prisons. And so that's like the first thing you ask for is for their MSA reports, which is like their paramedic stuff, and then as well as like their camera footage. So I'm like looking at this guy and I noticed that he has like these huge, deep, dark bruises in his back, but I really don't see them anywhere else. And what I thought was weird was that they were like directly on the spine. And I'm like, that's weird because you usually don't see bruises on the spine right after like an altercation. You would think if you're gripping or grabbing somebody to put them in a position to calm them, like what you would normally see like on cops or something, right? They grab their wrists. And so you would see like bruising from like a grip around someone's wrist. So I thought that was odd. And I said, so why would he get these bruises on his spine? What would have happened? And they said, well, when we were trying to get him down to the ground, he might have hit his back on the lower bunk. I said, oh, well, that would have been important to tell me when, you told me your story originally. And I said, okay. And I looked at the bed, like the beds are built into the wall. And if they're able to hold these guys, they have to be pretty sturdy. I mean, they have sharp metal corners, right? So, I took that into account. And
but if you hit a sharp corner, usually it cuts you. Like it scratches, right? Not necessarily.
It's not
bruised,
necessarily like it's pointed to a corner and then it's painted over. So I wouldn't necessarily say that it was like to a point, because they don't want someone to use that as like a weapon, right? Where they could, if they had a cellmate in there, that they could like cut them with it or something like that. Gosh, they don't even give them shoelaces or whatever else they could make into a shank. So yeah, I thought that was odd that they like waited for that, but I didn't see, he had old scars on his hands that were not like recent, like defensive or I would say offensive wounds from him, like punching someone. So, honestly, there wasn't a lot of trauma to his body, like not even really to his head. I did see like one little tiny contusion, like to like the front of his face, but nothing that would be like significant, like head trauma Or I'd be like, oh yeah, he fell and hit his head and he has like a head or like brain bleed. So it's like, okay, like that's weird. So it makes it so hard when you're like at a scene to be like, yep, this is what it is when you only have like a couple of these deep, dark bruises like on his spine. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So of course, ride back down like the like elevator of the doom. It's like the Disney land
That's what I'm
ride.
picturing. I hate it. It's Guardians of the Galaxy now, but it used to be Tower of Terror.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's like. And
Nope.
you add a huge body, and then like the bodies, when you put them onto like our lifts, you can't even keep them a long ways when you put them onto the elevators. So you have to sit them upright. So it's like, it makes it,
no, thank you.
It makes it more creepy. It's like the Silence of the Lambs when you see him like rolled in, he's like got this face thing on. It's like,
no.
You know what I'm talking about? It just makes it that much more unappealing. You know, it's like, here I am walking into the pee soaking like elevator, and then here's my body, and everyone's just like praying like, please let us get down to the bottom floor. And luckily when you exit, they take you out like a back way to where you're not having to push the body past, more prisoners. And so you're just like, well, I'll take that at least. So
I don't know. Maybe it's better if you do like show them like, look what happens in jail.
No, because you don't want them rioting if they know that it was the guards that did it, because then they would riot and then they would be killing all the guards. So yeah, you don't want that. So we finally get him out of there and I'm like, oh, so safe. It's like, let me get on Facebook. Marked safe from county jail. Yeah. So the next day, anytime there's, of course, any type of death, a jail, even if someone is like supposed to be put to death, like they are like on death row or whatever, you still have to do like a full evidence collection. And especially something like this, even if it was an accident or like they had like hanged themselves in jail, like anything that happens in jail, you still have to treat it like a homicide. So you have to do a full evidence collection. And the pathologist that got this case, like I really appreciated how much time that she took on this case. And especially I think because she knew that the family was going to be, of course, obviously very upset with the jail, but because this could be potentially a lawsuit. So she had me come in at one point and was like, hey, I wanted to show you this. She had flipped him over where he was lying prone. So he was lying on his stomach, and she had basically cut like layer by layer, starting from like his neck and down his back, because she wanted to like get a better look like at his spine and where all those like bruises were specifically. And she was like, so I thought that this was interesting. And this was, even after looking at x-rays, but his back had been broken so bad that it had almost completely severed his spinal cord. So he would have been paralyzed from his waist down, where he wouldn't, have even been able to move. So basically what had happened was he had like basically struck his back on the bed, and then they had like kneeled on him. And like literally, Kelly, when I tell you, like it was just hanging on by like a few fibers. It was the most bizarre thing. So like your spinal cord are like these really thin, clear, like fibers, and you could see his spinal cord, and it, just barely hanging on. So they left him there on the floor, like I don't even know if
he wouldn't have even struggled at that point, because once he hit the bed, he would have gone straight down.
Yeah.
Well, then once they, I guess, kneeled on him, because
Yeah. So basically, I don't even know if he would have like passed out from the pain at that point, or I don't honestly know the body's response to trauma from that pain. I would like to think that he would have passed out from that, but I mean, the fact that he died from that, like he couldn't even move.
So when that happens, because I'm just trying to envision it, so it's severed.
Mm-hmm.
So what is that? That just means that nothing's getting to his brain anymore either. So that's why he's like mumbling because he can't talk.
Yeah, I mean, he can't even like function from there. And I mean, I'm not a neurologist. I can't tell you everything that
Happens.
would happen between, as far as,
Yeah.
as far as like the brain shutting down. And
so it's painful. It's a painful death.
So I don't know, if I'm just speculating here, if there was such a trauma to the spinal cord that it like his brain, like there was like a trauma response to the brain that caused him to stop like breathing. I don't know. So yeah, he was laying there for that long and they didn't check on him.
Let me ask
externally, you don't look that bad, but internally it was terrible.
If they had called somebody, is that something that can be like fixed?
I mean, if anything, they could have at least taken him to the hospital. They would have taken him to a hospital. And I don't know if, he would have been probably paralyzed from the waist down, but I think he probably would have been alive. So
yeah. Oh, so did those guys get in trouble? Do you know?
There's always lawsuits there. So yeah, I mean, that would have gone to court. So after that, a lot of times after those things, I'm like, I have a million cases that go to court. So,
well, maybe that will be a "Where Are They Now" update.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, I just remember seeing that and just being like so
probably shocked. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just like, holy cow. Like, that's not what I expected at all behind those bruises, because, the human body can withstand a lot, but given that that wasn't something from like a car accident, from like a high speed, like type of accident, like it was literally from people doing that to him.
Well, I have to tell you, I was in Bali. First of all, this is life advice. Never sit in the front of a boat. Always sit in the back of the boat.
Yeah.
I am dumb and I sat in the front, not realizing we were going through these wakes. And we were going to go snorkel with manta rays, and we hit a wake. We hit a wake so hard that Jeff's bag went flying overboard. And so he reached across me to grab it before it fell in the ocean, because it had his passport and everything in it, right? And I flew up probably 3 feet in the air, and I landed on the bottom of the boat, and he landed on top of me. So I like couldn't breathe because it knocked the wind out of me, but we were still hitting wakes, right? So there was a really nice Australian couple that were on the boat. So if you're listening, thank you for saving me. Pulled me to the back of the boat, and we got through it, but I like couldn't move. Like it took a while, and I was in a lot of pain, and I remember like taking Tylenol, but so the next day I went and had a massage thinking like, oh, I'm just sore, right? And that chick worked on that spot and kept elbowing in that same spot. And it turns out I fractured vertebrae, but I couldn't sleep. I couldn't do, and still like I did go to chiropractor, and I also had that pre-nuvo scan done, and they said, did you have any trauma? Like, were you in a car accident? And I was like, well, no, I was in this boating accident. So I can't imagine like the pain of hitting something so hard. I mean, I just remember, obviously it knocks the wind out of you first and I couldn't imagine that was so minimal compared to something like that. And it was just I remember it being so painful that I was down, and that was at the beginning of my trip too.
Your breath away.
Literally takes your breath away. So how sad. It's just so sad. It's sad. Those are the kind of things that I have a really hard time with, because I don't think, obviously, you don't want that to happen to anybody.
It's a moral struggle, isn't it?
It's a moral struggle. That's actually a really good way of putting it, because we always say like, oh, you get what you get, right? But it's like,
I'm a big karma person.
Oh, that's so funny.
That's my job. It doesn't matter. My job is to not have biases and just to work it without rose-tinted glasses.
Yep. Well, but that's what made you good at it. So, well, if you have a job for Amy in California, no, I'm just kidding. Well, I'm kind of kidding, not kidding. Again, you can email us at kelly@diaryofadeathinvestigator.com or message us on Instagram at diaryofadeathinvestigator. As always, thank you guys for listening, and thank you for the emails. We really appreciate it.
I like getting that stuff.
Sometimes I tell Amy, I don't know that anybody's listening. And then we get an email like that. Also, I've received a couple of compliments this week, and I told Amy, man, I keep getting this. My head's not going to fit through the door.
Well, also too, when we have a lot of, like, Kelly will send me like, we have a lot of people listening in this place, or like a different country. And she's like, they're binge listening. And I'm like, man, I wish I knew who they were. And then she like will tell me like, hey, we got an email. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool. Like, I like knowing who it is. So kind of feels like you need a new friend. So.
Well, and again, I'm just one more thing before we cut out for the night. I think one of the biggest things that I always go into an interview is I make sure that I have a good mentor group around me. So I've surrounded myself with a group of people who can help me get to where I want to be. And I think like being a part of this forensics community is really important. And I think that everybody is really great about helping each other out. So don't be afraid to tap into those resources, because they are valuable. And I know I've learned a lot on our podcast. And the reason why we started it was more so that you could talk through some of the situations that you've been through and mental health. So we're still advocating for that. And again, one day, hopefully we'll make money on this, or, so that we can give back and create some funds for people who are in situations who do need to go talk to somebody, need counseling or therapy.
Hey, I love helping people. So need advice, I got it.
But until next time.
Bye.